We're in a moment, historical moment, during which cultural forms, repertoires, values, symbols, all travel, encounter, and cross-fertilize each other in ways that are quite unprecedented. It seems to me that here, cultural workers and their organizations have a special, rather general role to play in forging what a number of us call a world culture of cultures, that is, a culture of multiplicity and plurality. And doing so means forging an ethos, a practice, both an ethos and a practice of what one might call cultural translation. Cultural translation in and for a world cultural system that operates in the nexus, that is, the cultural translation operates in the nexus between boundedness and mobility. So when we talk about culture and culture being made and forged, it's always made and forged in a bounded place. But those bounded places are no longer bounded in the same way that they used to be, if they ever were. And of course, history shows us that the history of human civilization is also the history of interactions, contacts, exchanges, travel, completely. But what has happened in the last 20 years has been an acceleration. So globalization has been going on for a long time, but now we have highly, rapidly accelerated globalization going on. And in that context, it's really important that even in terms of cultural sustainability, that each clump of practices that we call a culture. I have a lot of difficulty with dealing with, as many people who are trained in anthropology nowadays have, of considering a culture as something which is a thing. Culture itself is a bounded whole. The place where it is made is bounded, territorially, to be sure. But the thing, the product, is not necessarily a bounded whole. And the challenge, of course, is that viability and visibility, both those things, viability and visibility, in a way, another understanding of sustainability that we heard about last night, are both dependent on that kind of flow and movement and cross-fertilization. And so that seems to me that getting into that process of cultural translation seems to me important. And what seems to me also very important in terms of the basic articulation of identity is getting away from the idea of identity as something that is given and fixed, that is something that's related to being rather than related to becoming. The very important thing today is to bear in mind that identities are very fluid, porous, and that this fluidity, this porosity, this movement, the mobility are things that artists are particularly sensible to, and the way in which all of these notions are also contested within societies, are dependent on power relationships, can maybe misused by dominant groups. That is an aspect of culture that the artistic sensibility has always been concerned about and alert to. And so I think that's also where there is a responsibility. Leadership or leading cultural organizations, and then, by definition, their leaders, have a responsibility, and that idea of responsibility comes out of something that Václav Havel said in an address he made to the Czech Parliament. He used the word responsibility, and I picked up on that notion of responsibility. Assuming that responsibility means developing the capacity, and that capacity for this group is through the languages and the powers of cultural expression, of the arts. The capacity to recognize, respect, and mutually negotiate situated difference in ways that create a productive and new fusion of horizons. Well, a fusion by definition is something new. So it's a question of creating that fusion of horizons, of taking more than just 2, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements of cultural repertoire, and combining them on a plane in a terrain that's entirely new. And this means contributing to an imaginary, a way of seeing the cultures of the world, not as fixed essences, but as sites of crossing. And this sites of crossing, this is a term that's been used by a well-known cultural theorist, James Clifford. And he says, sites of crossing, complex, unfinished paths between local and global attachments.